Hey guys, Funi here, and welcome to the Overwatch League Preview Show. In this series, I'm going to be looking at the games coming up this week, talking about the teams who are playing, and making my predictions for who I think will start strong and who will be coming into the league with a loss. Starting off on Thursday, the first game of the season is a classic rivalry, Houston vs Dallas. Both teams have made massive improvements in the off-season, with Dallas picking up the Korean core of the Paris Eternal from last season, as well as adding an all-star in Fearless, and the former Houston main support Jexy. This team is looking stacked this season, but Houston aren't messing around either. Dante's still on the team, and he's now supported by Happy and KSF, two very talented DPS players. The Outlaws tank line has been upgraded too, with Piggy and Django coming in from Talon, and to run off their team, Juby, the first collegiate player to step up to the Overwatch League, and their main support trade with Crimzo coming in from the Dallas Fuel. I think it's going to be a hard-fought battle, but with both teams full of new players, I think that Dallas' more proven lineup takes it in a 3-1 fashion.
Now, match 2 is already a massive game between the LA Gladiators and the San Francisco Shock. Both teams have been heavily favoured to be battling it out at the top, and this series could really show whether the new look Gladiators have what it takes to challenge the best in the league. Both lineups are absolutely insane, with the Glads acquiring Moth from the Shock to go alongside Shu for a nasty support duo. The rest of the team are looking just as good, as they managed to bring in a possible Rookie of the Year candidate in Muse at main tank, partnering Space and keeping Birdering and Kester plus Mirror in a scary DPS lineup. However, talking of scary DPS lineups, the Shock have brought in Glister and Nero to join forces with Tayo and Striker. Rollstar FD God partners Finals MVP Violet in the support line, plus Smurf and Choi, with the help of Super, make up the tank line. The Glads are going to be great this season, but I have the two-time champions coming out on top in a close 3-2.
Moving on to APAC for day 2, the Guangzhou Charge face off against the number 1 team in the region from last season in the Shanghai Dragon. I don't have too much to say about the Dragons, as I think they're looking as talented as ever. Fate is a bit of a downgrade over Fearless, but Molly's a bit of an upgrade over Luffy. They also picked up Erster to join regular season MVP Fleta and Rookie of the Year candidate Lip in the DPS lineup, so I expect more of the same from the Dragons this season. Guangzhou keeps some of the same pieces from last year, with Krong, Rio, Eileen, and Kariv being joined by Mandu from NYXL, plus Choi Siwan and MYK coming in from contenders teams Element Mystic and Billy, respectively. I don't see the Charge putting up too much of a challenge here, and I have Shanghai taking it in a clear 3-0. Next up is the LA Valiant versus the Chengdu Hunters. Chengdu looked much stronger on paper this season, with Gaga and Faraway coming in from the top Chinese contender squad in Team CC. They also won the Flash Ups tournament, playing with 3 of their new players in Monk, Kaneki, and Nisha, playing with Ameng and Late Young, plus Abrita from their academy team, beating a team with 4 of the Shanghai Dragons players on it in the final. Although it's just some fun, and I'm sure teams weren't taking it too seriously, people still want to win, and it's interesting to see them perform so well in a tournament where it's basically just random heroes and people kind of being flexible and playing around. On the other side, it's the Valiant. I don't really want to talk too much about them. I feel sorry for the players. They've been put in that situation. They've kind of got to make the best of it, and no hate on them, but honestly screw the org for what they did, and I think Chengdu beats them in a convincing 3-0. The final APAC game on day 2 is the Philadelphia Fusion versus the Seoul Dynasty. Unfortunately for the Fusion, they've been struggling with visas for their Western players, so they will be playing from Europe on ping, which is unfortunate. But even with that, their team's still looking pretty strong. Rascal's probably the most flexible DPS in the league, and with their pickup of Shockwave joining Carpe and EQO on DPS, I don't think there's any hero that these guys couldn't play to a really top level. Mano and Hotba come in as the tank line, being reunited from NYXL, and Toby joins with the Rookie of the Year Alarm and the British legend Funny Astro on support. Seoul remain mostly the same from last season. Longest running duo in Overwatch stay with Profit and Gesture. Fitz, Marvel and Creative all stay on the team as well, and they've been joined by Tuyu from Genji playing off tank, really good player, and SPB and Animo from the NYXL. This team is filled with veteran talent and insane players. I think coupled with the Fusion's visa issues, Seoul takes this in 3-1. NA Day 2 starts with the first game for the Toronto Defiant taking on the Vancouver Titan. Toronto have made big changes over the offseason, only retaining Beast and Logic from last season and bringing in a whole new team. Aztac, Ansunje and Lastro make up their support line, and while there isn't much Overwatch League experience between them, their tank line of Sado and Michelle have been in the league for a number of years. Kisu joins this team, along with his coach from the Fusion in KDG, and Nice coming in from T1 really bolsters their DPS lineup. Vancouver Titans are not so good. They lost their best player from last season in Shockwave, and bringing Linkster and Terror on DPS doesn't really cover for that loss. Friedwiener and Fire might have good names. I don't think they're enough to push the Titans forward all that much, and although maybe it could be a close 3-0, I still think it'll be a 3-0 for Toronto. The Atlanta Reign and Florida Mayhem make their debuts against each other next, and these guys have like some sort of friendly rivalry going on of who represents the worst area in the US or something, so good luck to these guys. I'm going to buy into Atlanta stocks this season somewhat. I think if these guys manage to flop with KSP, Pelican, Edison as a DPS lineup, they'll probably never do anything. I think Alice is a great player, and I think the rest of their lineup's pretty solid, so I think they'll do alright. Florida have maintained most of their roster from last season, and they did finish top 4 in NA, but I think other teams have improved a lot. OGE comes in for Fate, and Slime comes in for Chris. Both could be upgrades, but I think they also could be downgrades, depending on how they play. But other than that, Florida remain pretty much the same. I do think Atlanta will finish higher than Florida this season, but I actually think that Florida will win this one this early on in the season, and I think it'll be a 3-1 to them. Day 2 finishes off with two teams we've already talked about, the Dallas Fuel and the LA Gladiators. So we're just going to get right into the prediction. I really do think that the Fuel will be good this season finally, unless they just do the classic Fuel collapse and everyone just falls apart. But for once, I don't see this happening this season. However, with the Paris Eternal last season, I can see them starting slow and getting better as time goes on because of this. I predict that the Gladiators will come out on top in this one. I could see this one going to a game 5, but I'm going for a 3-1 in favor of the Gladiators. In APAC Day 3, the Guangzhou Charge and Seoul Dynasty start us off, and as I've talked about previously, Seoul's experience combined with the talent on this team could really see them challenging near the top this season. Of course, it is Seoul, and they are the Dallas Fuel of the APAC regular season, so they could just falter and just flop. But like the Fuel, I see them being more consistent this season and stronger as well. I think the Charge are pretty good, but the level of talent in APAC is insane, and they just aren't looking to be up to the level of these top teams, and I see Seoul winning this one 3-0. We continue with the Chengdu Hunters against the Shanghai Dragons, and I expect more of the same from the Dragons this season. There's not really much to say about this one. Chengdu can challenge them and make it difficult. I think their new team's looking better than they ever have, but I think Shanghai will be too strong for them in this game. I think they'll end up being the number 1 team in APAC across the whole season. But for this game, I'll give Chengdu a map, but they're only getting one. Shanghai wins this one 3-1. The final game of APAC Week 1 is the battle of the old Western teams, with Philadelphia Fusion finishing off their week with a beatdown of the LA Valiant. I think that if your org has the idea of just paying everyone minimum salary, getting in players who retired years ago, having off-rollers, and then your best player is like getting sued by his last team for like not fulfilling his contractual obligations, I think at that point you deserve to lose all your games. It's nothing against all the players, they're stepping in, they're doing their job, but I hope the Valiant becomes the worst team in Overwatch League history. At least with the Shanghai Dragons, people like them, and I don't think really anyone likes the Valiant. Fusion wins this one, easy 3-0. The final day of NA starts with Houston Outlaws versus San Francisco Shock. This could actually show how good Houston can be this season. This could really show their potential across the league. I've seen some wild takes in Scrimbucks. Scrimbucks rankings have Houston all the way up in 4, all the way up in 5. I think that's absolutely absurd, but this game could prove me wrong, and I'll be happy to admit that. I still have the Shock taking this one, of course, but I'll give a cough mat to Houston to make it a little interesting. So Shock wins, but 3-1. Florida Mayhem versus the Vancouver Titans is next, and looking on the bright side for Vancouver, at least they know they won't be as bad as the Valiant, and at least some people still like them. I know they fucked over their team at the start of Season 3, and they released all their players, and they picked up a load of new players, and all that kind of stuff, but their players are likable, and their org isn't completely horrible when you compare them to the Valiant, so no matter how many games they lose, at least they'll have that. But with that being said, they will lose a lot of games, and they will lose this one. Florida win this, I'll give him a clean 3-0. And for the final game of Overwatch League Season 4 Week 1, we have the Atlanta Reign versus the Toronto Defiant. As I said before, I do buy into Atlanta stocks somewhat, and although I think Toronto are pretty good, I think they're like a mid-table team, like 6th, 7th, maybe even 8th, depending on how well Houston do. I will say that it will be a pretty close game. I think with both teams being pretty new, Atlanta having a little more synergy, but I think both teams are pretty new, so I think it'll be a pretty close game, but I'm going to give it to Atlanta in a 3-2. And that rounds up this week's matchup. I'm going to try and be more consistent and do this every week. So leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Also make sure to like and subscribe. I really appreciate all the support for my videos. So thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.